Hello, and welcome to the Search Bar, your virtual happy hour hosted by the Franklin Institute. My name is Adam Piazza, the Adult Program Specialist at the museum, and I'll be your moderator and bartender this evening. At the Search Bar, we get to know local scientists through conversation and questions submitted by you. We'll be chatting over one of their favorite drinks, which we will make on screen for them to enjoy. And we encourage everyone at home to partake in a beverage themselves. So unwind and learn a little with us. Let us know what you are drinking and share your questions for our scientists in the comment section. Today, we actually have two guests at the Search Bar, both coming to us from Axalta, a global company focused on liquid and powder coatings. They have been a great partner of the museum since 2013, supporting our endeavors in the museum programs and the Philadelphia Science Festival. Today, our guests are Nancy Lockhart and Dr. Neil Murphy. Everyone, let's welcome Dr. Neil Murphy and Nancy Lockhart.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. Before we get into making the drink, Nancy, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Neil, follow up a little bit about yourself as well. So Nancy, I pass it off to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nancy Lockhart. I'm the Global Product Manager for Color for Axalta Coating Systems. I've been working in the industry over 20 years and kind of all things color when it comes to implementing color design, color technology, and new color products into our pipeline.
Very cool. Very cool. And Neil?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is Neil Murphy. I'm a senior scientist with Axalta. I'm seated at the Axalta Global Innovation Center in the Navy Yard in Philadelphia.
Very cool. So we've got someone very local, and then we've got Nancy a little further. Nancy, which time zone are you on? What's our time delay?
Yep, same time zone. I'm in Detroit.
Never mind. So we're all enjoying a happy hour at the same time. It's 5:30, a little bit past. So Nancy, what drink would you and Neil like today?
I would love it if you would make us a sea glass cocktail.
A sea glass cocktail. Now, sea glass cocktail, we're all going to learn out there why it's called this, but it's a variation on a Collins drink, right? So a Collins drink has a long history starting off in London, one that essentially looks at their history of punches being a popular item. Collins drink was this sour cocktail that had some really key ingredients. You had something sweet, you had something sour, and a base spirit, and it contained water. So it's like almost like a very refreshing lemonade, like I would drink it on a warm day. We've all got this sun going on. And at Collins, there was originally two members of this family. You had John Collins, and you had, here we go, Tom Collins. Both of them pretty much connected to different types of gin, but today we just use a Tom Collins as our general title for any gin-based drink. So a lot of this recipe you'll see reflects a Tom Collins with a little extra twist. So let me wash my hands to get myself ready. All right. And again, let us know what you are drinking in the comments section. Maybe you have some of these ingredients. Maybe you have a tried and true example. But let's get to making these drinks. So Neil, I'm assuming you're going to have the same drink as well?
Yes, please.
Awesome. So we're going to make 3 sea glasses. Now, for this recipe, our first core ingredient is gin. So each one of these is going to get about 2 ounces of gin. There we go. Now, gin, if everyone else has joined us in a couple of these other episodes, know that it's a distilled spirit that has extra herbs and flavors kind of added during a second distilling. So similar to vodka, but with a little bit of an extra essence and flavor we got going on there. The next ingredient we're going to add is a little bit of lemon juice. Now, between the 3 of these, we're just going to need about 1 ounce total between the 3. That should be good. Excellent. Now, the next part is what really makes this special. And this is our blue curacao. So we've got our blue curacao because a lot of people probably have this in their house. Somewhere in there, we've got this, that grenadine. But blue curacao is named after an island that is very tropical. And it gets a lot of its flavors from a bitter orange called the, let me get my name right on this one, called the Laraja. So that's where it gets its like citrus and its bite from. So that seems about right. Next thing we're going to do is add our ice. So again, between the blue curacao and the lemon, it's just a splash, not too much. We're going to top it off with some ice. Make it nice and chill. One more. Let's add some more ice. Let's really get into that spring and summer vibe of this drink. The color really has me reminding me of like ocean. You know, we're all stuck at home right now, but we all kind of wish to get by the water soon. So this kind of helps out. Then we're going to top with some club soda. About 2 ounces. There we go. Lovely. And the last bit is a slice of lemon. So we're going to put it right there. And one right there. Excellent. All right. So Nancy, I'm going to first hand off your drink. Here you go. Hope you enjoy that one. You got your drink, Nancy?
Thank you very much. Good job.
Excellent. Good. Looks good. And Neil, here's your drink.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. And let's just toast to science and sea glass.
The
Cheers.
science is
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, let me know how it is.
Excellent mixology. Good job.
Very
Ooh,
good.
that's really good. It's got that little bit of like tart from the curacao and the lemon, that sweetness. It's very balanced. I can definitely see drinking a decent number of these. But we're not. We're going to have our one drink for this session. So Nancy, why sea glass? Why this drink? Tell me what's so amazing and special about this.
Sea glass is the drink of the year. It coincides with our Global Automotive Color of the Year for 2020, which of course is called Sea Glass. And it was inspired by the sparkling oceans, just like you referred to when you were making the drink, as being a really refreshing color, something that is happening in the market right now, where we're seeing all these green shade blues being more heavily used, much more now than they were in the past. In the past, we had a lot more of the cobalt blues or the red shade blues. And so trend-wise, it fits very much into what's happening today, but it also has a lot of technology attributes that make it really a color trend of today, but a futuristic color for tomorrow's autonomous vehicles. So we just wanted to really exemplify everything we could with this color. So why not have a drink that goes with it?
Is this the first year you've done like a pairing of like a drink with a release of a car color?
No, we've done other drinks in the past. Our 2019 color of the year was called Sahara. It was this beautiful golden bronze. So you may have guessed we used whiskey in that drink with some burners and some lemon, and that worked very well. We've also had a color called Starlight. That was a white.
Okay.
And that was in 2018, and we used rum chata in that drink. So that was not too many white liqueurs, so that one worked out well.
I like how you made sure you kind of incorporated like a different spirit with each one, right? So you had the rum chata, you had the whiskey, now you've got the gin. So you're covering all those core spirits. And the other thing that I find very cool is that when I heard about this drink, I also learned you have like the mocktail version, which I think is a really just overall clever idea when anyone's trying to like debut a drink, because a lot about drinking that I enjoy is this social atmosphere, right? I get to talk to people in new places, but not everyone drinks alcohol, right? And we don't want to assume they do. So it's really cool that there's a mocktail version. Also, because you kind of primary work with automotive coatings, it's a good thing that, like we're a company that deals with automotive. Drunk driving, that's not something we ever want to think about. So it's really nice that you thought about that other consumer and just general safety. And so for people out there who want to learn how to make that mocktail, here's the recipe for the mocktail. So it's going to require a 1/4 cup of Mountain Berry Blast Powerade. We're also going to add a 1/4 cup of V8 Splash Blue Raspberry. Then we're going to top it off with a half a cup of 7-Up and garnish with a lemon slice. So I have a drink very similar to this without any of that alcohol content. So it's really great that anyone gets to enjoy that. Even kids get to enjoy that mocktail. Like it's a really clever idea. Now, Neil, what are some of the ways that you kind of have what role do you have in making the color? That's where my words were supposed to go, Neil.
Yeah. Well, when Nancy approached me about this, I was super excited because I was familiar with the work they'd done in the past with Sahara and all those other colors. And so I thought it'd be a really cool opportunity. And unlike some of the past colors, what I thought was really interesting is, the traditional colors are meant to be formulated based on what their response is within the visible region, 400 to 700 nanometers. And so all the scientists work very hard to see what the pigments will do, how they'll respond, and how they'll reflect at those wavelengths.
Okay.
For this color, what we did differently is we were really concerned about not just the visible region, but the wavelengths where all of our sensors operate for our self-driving vehicles and our autonomous vehicles. And some examples, like if you have like blind spot detection or lane assist or adaptive cruise control, typically you'll have a little cutout in the front of your car with your radar sensor. What those require is that your paint in some instances is transparent to the radar signal. And we also incorporate LiDAR, which is a future technology, but we expect to play a part in future autonomous vehicles, and as well as total solar reflectance, which controls whether or not it absorbs the sun's rays to save energy for air conditioning and things like that. And so for one of the biggest things we were concerned about is radar, because it's already in operation, it's already in cars. And so we really wanted to make sure that our coatings were not interfering in any way with the radar signal. So a lot of unique challenges here.
What are some of the colors that, like, in a broad spectrum of that phrase, don't work out well for like radar detection? Is there like certain colors because of wavelength that it just doesn't work out well?
Yeah, so radar operates at a wavelength of 4 millimeters. So it's a very long wavelength compared to where our color is between 400 and 700 nanometers.
Yeah.
And so one application of radar is the body scanners used in airports. So they're very reflective to anything metallic, anything like that. So colors that have a large amount of metallic or effect pigments can have trouble transmitting radar sufficiently.
So so for those, making sure information went through, you wouldn't want it too metallic, right? Is that make sure it's the case?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's also a matter of the thickness of the bumper surface or the the vehicle surface. These sensors are typically hidden behind bumpers or the quarter panels. Any plastic surface they can be hidden behind because the plastic is transparent.
Now, I'm like a novice to cars. What are the quarter panels? In case anyone out there is also watching, you're like, I love this language, but I'm trying to figure out where are the quarter panels.
They're in the back, right, Nancy, in the rear of the sides of the bumper.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anywhere on the vehicle that you have your body side panels, your quarter panels could be up in the front, your hood, your anywhere, right? Your bumper is where your what we call your fascia.
Oh, what is it? Can you say that again? It's called your
fascia.
Oh, your fascia? Got it. Okay. And then for Nancy, how does that role, the work that Neil does, translate with like your job in the color development? Like how much is that communication? How does that work out as a team?
Yeah. So Neil's work is extremely important in our color development things that we do, because we're always looking for new technologies to highlight our color trends. we need to make sure that our colors not only look good, but they're durable and they're functional. And so
Okay.
for the autonomous vehicles of the future, it has to be more than just a color that looks good. It has to have vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And when it comes to C-Glass, one of the things we wanted to do was to make sure that it incorporated this technology in there, along with many of its other attributes. So many people still want to have beautiful sparkling effects. We want it to look very premium. We want it to have something that showcases very well in different lighting effects. And so in this case, we used a glass flake that would allow it to look extremely premium and exciting when the sun hits it.
Yeah.
And which I keep getting blasts of sun here. But that's one thing you see when, Neil talked about the different parts of the vehicle. When you look around a vehicle and the sun hits it, you want to see that shimmer. And so just like when you're looking, across an ocean and you see the shimmering light, you want your car to have some of those special effects. And so giving it different flake effects is something that we spend a lot of time with, and making sure that it's up to speed with today's trends. And then also making sure that it has global appeal, because when you look across how color gets communicated and gets used, different regions have different preferences. And so we're always trying to keep a pulse on the industry as to what the latest trends are and what color best fits the industry for today.
Gotcha. I think let's have a quick sip of our drink, kind of bring that back in. Now, as I share this drink, Nancy, what are some of your favorite colors that you've ever worked on? What are some of those your favorite colors for automobiles, but just in general? What does that feel like?
Just in general, yeah. Well, I must say that blue is one of my favorite colors to work on because I typically own blue vehicles. So I have a long-standing history of owning blue vehicles. But I also like to work on vehicles that showcase the car really well, right? And have even last year when we had Sahara was this golden bronze, and on its own it's beautiful, but it's even better when you put it with a black stripe or a black roof or some black type of accent, because customization is so important right now. We're seeing that a lot of people want to accentuate their vehicle with different types of stripes or options. And so I think two-toning vehicles and color combinations is something that everyone loves to do, right? How can I best customize my vehicle? And so not only working on one color, but thinking about how colors can be used together is probably one of my favorite things to do.
Very cool. And then when it comes to deciding these colors, how big of a team is that? What is some of that research that you look at? Because you're not only thinking local, right? You're looking at this product as a global color. So what is some of that research, and what are some of that research and some of the findings that you have made over the years?
Yeah, so we have a global team. This really does take a lot of research. It's very data driven. So we look at our color popularity report that's been running since 1953. We have some color preference surveys. We have color mapping where we look at the gamut of what we can supply today and what the industry uses today and where we want to go with it, kind of how can we just expand outside the current gamut. We look at our, voice of the customer and understand where is color going? What is the dream for color that people want? And all that is very automotive specific, but when it comes to looking at trends in the industry, there's a lot of data that we kind of collect and look at. I mean, it could be anything from electronics and music, fashion, culture, politics. I mean, you name it, any product design that's coming out there, we're looking at. And not everything influences automotive, and automotive influences other things. But we try and keep a pulse on everything and understand the magnitude of the influence that these other things have on automotive color.
I mean, at the end of the day, like people who drive, like that car is part of their lifestyle. It wants to reflect who they are. So I think looking at, technology, pop culture, not just cars themselves helps because, you get an idea for a person when you look at that whole thing of like what's trending. So cars are just, especially paint colors are part of that. Companies release, colors of the year. And I think what's great about this opportunity is it's not just how that color might make someone feel, but like the real practical attributes of it, like as Neil was talking about with sensors. And so Neil, like how big is your team? What is some of that work that happens there to make sure it, is perfect for the road on like a safety standpoint?
Yeah, so I'm on the color technology team at the GIC, and I think we have around maybe 6 or 7 scientists and probably 8 technicians. And really what we spend most of our time on is, making sure we have adequate matches for our different colors, maintaining the databases to enable formulators to calculate what the colors will be and to properly shade our different matches. And with the new autonomous vehicle work, we're starting to see a lot of opportunities for innovation, such as for LiDAR, which is sort of a method that uses lasers to detect objects. It stands for light detection and ranging. So it determines the relative position of an object based on the way the laser light reflects off of it. We're seeing that this is becoming a potentially pretty popular method for autonomous vehicles. It's already in use in a lot of the sort of prototype autonomous vehicles. And the team at the GIC created a LiDAR measurement device in order to meet the manufacturer needs for LiDAR testing. So that's just one example of how the team is sort of working towards creating solutions for these new challenges in terms of the autonomous vehicle space.
Very cool. I know, like, when you're talking about how, like, the LiDAR detection, in my head, I thought of, like, the giant wind halls that, like, airplane manufacturers, that, like, giant turbines that, like, blow air to, like, see how it maps over different shapes. What does, like, that lab look like at LiDAR? Like, in my head, is it, like, entrapment of a bunch of lasers, or is it actually way simpler?
I wish, it's the equipment itself looks pretty cool, but the biggest thing for LiDAR, since it's so sensitive, is to have no external light sources for the test equipment.
Oh, yeah.
So really, it kind of looks like a black box. And when you open it, it has a big laser inside, and then it has a motorized stage to control the geometries and things like that.
Very cool. And what are some of like your favorite colors that like you've worked with over the years, and like what drew you to them, or what are some colors that like you looked at and maybe you didn't name and you're just like, this is not going to work? Like, what are some of those like hits and misses of colors?
Yeah, so for LiDAR, anything that's super dark is going to be difficult for the sensor to see. And that's because the LiDAR wavelength is 905 nanometers, which just so happens to be right outside the visible spectrum. And so really, if it's going to be black in the visible spectrum, it's going to be nearly black or undetectable for LiDAR. So anything dark kind of makes me a little nervous for detectability. In terms of colors I really like are anything that has a sort of a pearlescent look to it, something that has like a slight color shifting effect, with angle and things like that, just because they're really, really interesting under different lighting conditions and different geometries and things like that.
Very cool. And so hearing this, like, you've got these giant, these teams that help focus on it, right? What's the team size that comes up with the drinks? Is there just one person on your team who does this pairing, Nancy or Neil, or do you have like an entire development team? I'm really curious to know.
The team keeps growing, so more people want on the team. Yeah, we had I think was it January, Neil? We had a team meeting to really go over this and spend a lot of research mixing up different options for this drink. I can't tell you we got it on the first try. You know, we had to keep trying again and again. So it worked out well. You know, and normally we wouldn't do this. It's like complementary shading where you put something yellow in a blue. You normally wouldn't do that in a can of paint, right? You normally would blue with two different blues and something else. So we went out on a limb here at going complementary shading on our drink.
It's really, again, like it's really refreshing. It looks good too. Like it's just very visually appealing. And you know, cars aside, one of our viewers, which as a reminder for anyone watching, if you have any questions, please submit them in the comment section. Our barback Katie, who works on our social media team, is sending me those questions. And one question someone asked is that in general, what are Nancy, Neil's, and myself's favorite color? Just period. So Nancy, what is your favorite color?
So of course I'm not going to have a simple answer. So for cars, it's blue.
Yeah.
For my walls at home, it's white. For clothes, it's a different color, right? So, but for automotive color, it's blue.
And so if you were to have to wear one item, I'll use this one to phrase it for Neil and myself. If you were to have like a very like simple outfit, right? Whether it's white or black, that item of flair, whether it's a bracelet, earrings, or socks, what is that color of flair we'll go with?
Rose gold.
Ooh,
Yeah.
That was not an option in my head, but yet, oh, I love it. Love it. Neil, how about you? What's your color of flair for an outfit?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'd have to say blue.
What shade of blue were we leaning toward?
Maybe dark blue.
A dark blue?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is definitely like a pearl necklace, right? It's a dark blue pearl necklace you're wearing, Neil?
Gotta mix it up.
Just mix it up. For me, I think it's got Kelly green. Like,
oh, right.
Yeah, I think I've worn like a green jacket once and someone was like, that looks really good on you. And I looked in the mirror and I'm like, you're right. I'm sticking with this color combination. So Kelly green is definitely like the one that I stick to. Trying to think, anything else like right now during this time, what are some other things that Axalta's doing, right? Like we're all doing this from home because there's, you know, unfortunately COVID-19. What are some things that Axalta's doing to kind of help out with this crisis?
Well, you know, we weren't making paint for a little while. So, and with this crisis, we had some time to kind of pause and think about what was going on and start helping our community. So we started making hand sanitizer in several plants in the US, Latin America, and Europe. And we've been distributing it to local hospitals, fire departments, schools, museums, community, you know, places that are in need. So that's been something that we've been really happy to do. And so we made the WHO formulation for hand sanitizer and have been distributing that to local people. There's also some other things that Axalta has done in regards to distributing PPE to hospitals and seat covers to hospital professionals and things like that. So yeah, it's a very special time that I think we'll all remember, you know, and it's something that is different. You have a little bit of hand sanitizer on your
I do.
I'm there, but you know, when the museum opens, we'll make sure that you have some for the museum to in larger quantities than that to use at the facility.
I mean, I do look forward to like when the museum opens and we all get back together. But what's kind of, you know, interesting is we use opportunities like this, right, to not stop everything, right? We pivot, we change. You know, if it weren't for this situation, like would the three of us be having this conversation? Probably not. Like I wouldn't be learning from you two. And so, like thinking about like where you are now, what's like your backstory? Like what led you to working at Axalta? Like what were like the job you had before that? Like what led you to what you do now. Nancy, we'll start with you first.
Okay. I kind of came from a paint background my whole life. I kind of lived and worked around paint. My father was also a paint chemist, and I began actually at our Mount Clemens facility, and had worked in the laboratory. I'd worked in environmental roles, and then when I moved into color, I kind of never looked back. So I've been in color my whole life. It's been one of the things that I think about my whole, even in my day-to-day activities. I have a lot of interest in art and things like that. So color is something that just comes natural to me. And the science behind it, I think, is, extremely exhilarating. We can just take something in a can of paint and spray it onto something and make it look, so magical. So
yeah,
it's a great field to be in.
It's definitely like a creator role, right? And I feel like that's a role that I relate to, is the idea of creating something for people. I also love color. My background with architecture, my leaning toward it was always like how color is used for communication, or how like that psychological effect. And so hearing everyone has like, oh, I also have an interest in colors in my life, but your pivot is different than mine. It found a way where science played a different role. And how about you, Neil? How about you and your story?
Yeah, so I've always really been interested in the way that light interacts with different materials. And my previous job before I worked here, I worked for the Air Force doing research and development for coatings there for optics. And I got the opportunity from Axalta after doing a bit of a job search, and my now wife is also from about 15 minutes away from the Axalta Global Innovation Center. So the combination of the location and the interesting job and pursuing something that I think is really cool,
Yeah.
Working with color and working with radar and LiDAR was just something that I couldn't say no to. So that's how I came here.
Very neat. And like working with that like specialty, and this goes for both of you, Neil, you can answer first. What has some of that like work done that you've kind of seen seep into like your personal life? Like the idea of, you've done all this research about color. Where have you applied that information to like maybe like painting your house? Like, are you making sure your house doesn't get detected by radar? Or, like other little things that you've learned from work that you kind of carry with
you?
That Neil?
Yeah, for both of you. So, yeah. So maybe Nancy, you want to go first? Do you have an idea of how you like seen it seep in?
I'm always looking at color, no matter what we're doing in our home. I mean, right down to the flowers that you're planting in your yard, how you're arranging things. It's always a part of our life. I remember in a past home, we went through 6 different whites on the wall, and my husband was like, oh my gosh, please pick one. I mean, that's just see it, right? So I think understanding color, how light hits it, how different lights make a difference, it's just part of what you start paying attention to every day. And so I think it has a big influence on consumer product design and how people are influenced in what to buy. And so I like to pay attention to it. It's just interesting to me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And how about you, Neil?
Some of the biggest things I think I've noticed are just if you see like a color that doesn't quite match on a car, like if there was if the bumper got refinished and something just isn't quite right, or sometimes parts of my job have me looking through a microscope at different little aluminum flakes or pearls or things like that, and once you see what those are, you really like, when you walk past the car, you can't help but notice them. And before I started working here, I don't even know if I knew they existed. Definitely took for granted the role that the coatings play. And I know I've had previous cars, cars that were made in the mid 90s. And it really seems like people take for granted how well cars last now. You don't see things sort of rusting out or kind of disintegrating early. And so that's one thing I didn't really notice until I started working in this industry.
Very cool. I think that's also is like where you pay more attention to, right? So like if you were to read a book or watch a video like welding, which I've done once because we've been in isolation, so I've obviously found a niche documentary to watch. But then like you go out and you see like places that had to do some quick metal assembly and they see how two parts wedge. You're like, before you're like, okay, the two pieces are connected, but now you take a look at the patterns. You see how careful it was and what that method is. So I feel like that's that same thing where, prior to working in industry, you walk by, you're like, all right, that car, it's black or it's that color. But now you really pay more attention to each of those features. You mentioned how like a piece of aluminum in there, or I agree when the bumper doesn't line up with the color because they must have gone into an accident. Like I totally see that and also have those moments. And so when making like, going back to sea glass, like when you look at that, did you notice like when you made different variations of that color, like did you pick up on some of those details and like how it worked with the detection or just how it looked for longevity? Because as you mentioned, like, we see these cars are out there for longer. So how minuscule were those pieces between solidifying that shade of sea glass?
So it's pretty significant. Thanks to Neil's research, we're able to kind of be able to formulate before we even load any paint and understand what type of flakes we should use and what kind of performance those are going to have. But then when it comes to formulating the color itself and understanding what it's going to look like in the visible, we want to make sure that it looks refreshing, that it looks on trend. Because if you take color and even if you call it, something like a teal or something, people are going to revert back to a color from the 80s or the 90s. And so you want to think new and fresh, right? I mean, if you look back in the 1990s, there were some years where hunter green or darker reds were the #1 color, right?
Yeah.
And then, if you look back to the 50s, you had all the pale, beautiful colors of the 1950s that were out there. So in today's world of having a lot of neutrals, we track this on our, color popularity of all these neutrals. 80% of the cars on the road today are just black, white, silver, or gray, right? Yep. So now punchy color, it's really going to be noticed. So you got to get it right.
Do you see avocado as a color ever coming back to like a trend? Is that happening? And can radar pick up avocado? I'm pretty sure a lot of people are trying to figure that out.
I hope avocado comes back. I think green will start coming back. It's certainly coming back in home and other products that you see. And, I think one thing that's taught us this year too is blue, picking this beautiful color this year. I guess it was by happenstance that we picked a color that, psychologically kind of means optimism and hope and things like that. So, the colors that people are thinking about and will be reaching for in the future could be a little bit more calming and, soothing, not so harsh and dramatic. So I think green is a perfect color for that type of thought process. And so I hope green comes back.
Me too. I agree. And when you look at these color trends, what have you noticed regionally? Like, what are some of those countries that have, vastly different ideas of what color cars should be compared to the US? Because you mentioned the US, the primary colors are, you said black, white, silver, am I correct? What did you say for US?
Yeah, so I mean, we're white, black, gray, and silver as the top colors, but then blue. And overall worldwide, white is the most popular color by a long shot, right? It's 38% of the worldwide market. But for the first time this year, there was a breakaway, first time in a long time, there was a breakaway, and gray is the most popular color in Europe. And you may say, oh, isn't that so exciting? Now you just have another neutral, but it is, right? And so for the past, since around 2000, these neutrals have taken over ever since silver topped the charts. And so now we're starting to see some diversity in the regions and, just some mix-ups. So we're seeing a lot more people gravitating towards some of the colors. And so that's something positive. And the other thing we had seen is, with the global enterprise around the automotive industry, excuse me, many of the countries were producing the same types of colors, but to get the regional differences, the most used, or I should say blue is most used in Europe and North America, right? So there's other regions that don't use blue as much, but there's other regions like parts of Asia who prefer higher amounts of the warmer colors, like the browns and the beiges. So there is some nuances that we pay attention to.
Very cool. And then I'm trying to think. So for Neil, going back to that work that you do at the lab, what other types of projects are you involved on that aren't just strictly like automotive colors? Like you do coatings for other objects or just primary cars?
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what's going to show up. Probably a couple of years back, I went into my office and there was a box of wooden cabinets sitting there.
Okay.
And so for some of the businesses that we have in wood, they require color matches as well. And so you really don't know what's going to show up. I know there's the wood business. There's I think we sell coatings to Gibson guitars. We do
very cool.
A ton of different stuff. And so anytime there's a problem with the color matching, they'll come to our group, and so you don't know what's going to come through the door next.
I love those random projects. Like I'll get to work and there'll be a post-it with like a random, like, Adam, do you know where the CPR dummy is? And I'm like, we don't have one. Let's work on making or getting one for a project. So I love random projects, right? Because it keeps you on your toes. It's like new project, new way of thinking. And I think at the end, those ways of thinking will cross, right? Like, have you learned something from color matching for Gibson that you then translated over to cars, or is it pretty much like silo?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to work directly on that one, but from the wood matching stuff, we created a lot of tools to, recognize patterns and to understand, how these different, complex sort of surfaces can change based on the ingredients in the coatings. So I think there's some lessons to be learned there, but yeah, it makes for a pretty interesting day-to-day environment.
Very cool. So I think we're going to get ready to wrap up, but before we leave, I first want to thank you both very much for joining me at the Search Bar. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. But my last thing for both of you is what's something you want to tell everyone out there? Like, what is your color story? Like if you were to say like the importance of color and like what you do with science, it's very like weird, twisted puzzle of a question, I know. So I'm going to have you kind of interpret it the best way. How about we start with you, Nancy?
So I guess if you're going to talk about color, and I would say, there's a lot of people out there who have said, oh, they've gone to the dealership and that was the only color there, so they bought that car. I mean, I would say, don't be afraid to ask for what you want, right? It's an important purchase, and tell the dealers what you want so that we can get those colors out there. It's important to hear, and never settle when it comes to having something like that. Color is the first thing you notice on a vehicle because it's the biggest surface, right? So it's just boom, first thing you think is blue when you walk up, or white or red or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a fun thing. And the one thing I love about color and talking to people about color is everyone has an opinion, and all opinions. So it's a great field to be in.
Love it. And how about you, Neil?
I think the biggest thing I've gotten out of working in color related industries is the appreciation for still being able to make appealing colors that can adhere to the constraints of radar sensors, LiDAR sensors, ultrasonic sensors, all of these different things that, you know, we have so many rules and so many limitations on what we can use. It's really impressive that, you know, Nancy's team and the formulators and designers can still make very appealing colors while keeping them safe for the customers.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, color is a way to be creative, but I think also what's great is that, you know, you work with certain limitations, but you don't let that limit your options. You take them as variables and you try to push it to what's the, you know, I have to make sure it abides by these things, but how do I push it so that the consumer wants it? You know, as Nancy mentioned, like, don't settle for, you know, something you don't want. Like, it is an investment. So whether it's, you know, the car you drive, any other piece, like, it's, that color is a part of your life, right? It's something you see every day. It should bring you joy. It should all be connected. And I think it's really cool, the work that you two do to make sure it is both appealing, safe, and planning for the future. Like, it's a very, like, you're not stuck in the time, you're constantly progressing. So it's really cool. So before we kind of send off, let's do one final cheers. I want to thank you again for joining us today.
So will you be mixing this again? Is this going to be a favorite of yours?
Oh, this will be a favorite of mine as well. I've made a lot of drinks this last few episodes of gin, but this one has like the least amount of that like alcohol bite. So it's a very like refreshing drink just to like sip and enjoy outside. But I want to thank you both very much, and I want to thank everyone else out there for joining us at the Search Bar. We look forward to seeing you again. So thank you both, Nancy and Neil. We hope to chat with you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
And I think you're good to go as well, Neil. Thank you again very much. Again.